think mine's on my desk. I think mine's on my desk.
Okay. That's us. There we are. Now we're live.
Hey.
All right. So, hey everybody. Those of you who are watching live, will wave, and I'll see myself wave here in just a second on the video. Yep. There I go. Thanks for those of you who came. Those of you who are online, you can only virtually eat ice cream and brownies, and that's not the same. So just so you know. We wanted to talk to y'all tonight about, answer questions if you have any about the Southern Baptist Convention. Justin and Chelsea will be here momentarily. They're joining us this evening. The first thing I want to do, and I didn't tell Justin and Lacey or Justin and Chelsea this, is let them talk. All four of them went for the first time to an annual meeting of the Southern Baptist Convention, so kind of just want them to give their impressions first of what they thought. Maybe don't be too honest or brutal. I was looking at, well, you were looking at me, she was looking at you, so just kind of, first impressions, what you thought. Was it what you had expected? Was it not? Etc. And go.
I guess I'll go first. I really enjoyed the experience. I had it both met and exceeded my expectations. The organization of the entire event was really impressive. Just the fact that there were so many people and everything went all smoothly. All of the way they had all of the events set up and the area set up with signs and everything was very, very professional and well done. The praise and worship was excellent. I was worried that we wouldn't know any of the songs. Of course, everybody's worried about that, but we knew 90% of the songs, things that we sing every Sunday. That was great. They had a single leader for the music services, but they used different groups to perform for different days. So we got kind of a variety, a variety of styles. That was nice. The mission board events were probably the most critical things to me. The North American and the International Mission Board events were very eye-opening, because we see little bits and pieces of those things in the videos that they show us occasionally about where our money is going, what it's doing, and but these were very in-depth presentations about the things that they've accomplished and the people that they've touched, and that was very important. I think that we got that experience, and I think that if possible we should try to incorporate more of that into what we see here, because that really gives you more of a big picture about what the organization as a whole is accomplishing as a mission organization, not just as a leadership type organization. And more stuff is going on. I guess on the downside, just like anything that's good, there were people there that were trying to make it bad. They were trying to get attention for themselves or for their agendas, and I thought that Dr. Barber did an excellent job of avoiding that. He was very good at steering things that were not on topic, off, getting away from them and getting us back on track. And he did it in a very nice, polite way and didn't ruffle anybody's feathers. And I thought I was impressed by that. But overall, really great experience.
I'll just say that he's talking about Bart Barber, the president of the Southern Baptist Convention. He's pastor at First Baptist Church in Farmersville, Texas, a church. They probably run 225, 250, not what you normally have as an SBC president. Usually SBC presidents are either seminary presidents in the past or large mega church pastors. That tends to be what it is. And Bart is he could actually be a president of a seminary or a mega church pastor if he wanted to be, and he is perfectly happy raising his cows, one of whom is Lottie Moon. That's her name. And Annie Farmstrong.
Yeah.
And he just had a bull named Yadier Molina, who's a baseball player for St. Louis. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. He's Mr. Southern Baptist, as a matter of fact, but he did do a great job. So that's who he's talking about. It is.
Well, I had no preconceived ideas. I didn't know what to expect. I just knew just what I've heard them talk about. And it was a huge worship service, lots of little worship services, a few really great speakers. I mean, just all kind of things. And then you have this business meeting that, welcome Saltzmans, glad to have you. This huge business meeting with a ton of people. They have to have a parliamentarian expert there to keep you on track. I mean, I brought my stuff just to show you guys, like the agendas, all the messenger guide for all the amendments and the resolutions and all that kind of stuff. When you get there, they give you this backpack full of info. And so you can kind of read up on things before you get to the business meeting part. But just to see the enormity of that process. I mean, all I know is our business meetings here and Robert's Rules of Order here and, trying to second things and, whatever. But it is so complicated and you have to do it just right or, that part was just interesting to me. But hands down, my favorite thing was the worship. And like Justin said, the North American Mission Board, International Mission Board, their presentations were amazing. And it's just it was more of a tangible way to see what we do in that little box back there on the wall, what that does across the world. Our meager percentage that we send, which is not meager, but in the grand scheme of things, our little bit, we can take ownership of what they can do because we give. And that was very humbling, quite honestly, to see the things they've done, the things they did right there in that room. They blessed people right then and there, financially and with needs in their lives. And, we were part of that. Our church is a part of that. And that was really, really special to be a part of that. And I'm really glad we went. It was long. It was tiring. It was a lot of stuff. But to see the people that we hear about, like Bart Barber and some of the other names that you hear about in Southern Baptist news and things like that, to put a face to them and actually be close to them and say hi to them, is very interesting and just makes it a little more personal, I guess.
One of the things, so there were a total of about 18,000 people between messengers, which I believe was topped out around 12 or 13. It was 12,000. 2,000 registered guests, and then, or 3,000 guests and 3,000, media and the exhibitors, because there's an exhibit hall, which it was our largest exhibit hall of any convention. And the exhibit hall is for ministries to come and they rent their space because you rent the space, and to talk about their ministry. And it is then that place primarily, well, I guess probably only, where you get to go to, as an example, the New Orleans Seminary booth, which isn't a booth, it's a living room, and meet Jamie Dew, the president of the seminary, and 15, 20 professors. And then you walk over here to the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission section, and there's Brent Leatherwood, and you get to go up and talk to him. And it's you realize that these are people. They're not, we call them entity heads or presidents, but they're just people, especially when you start talking to them, you realize, and some of them are more people than other people, you know, some of them, they all have their quirks and their personalities, and some are down to earth, and you know, you feel like you could wrestle with them or something, and then others are prim and proper, and that's just kind of who they are, but that's all right, that's just who they are. So, the exhibit hall was where we got to do that, and then that's the kids, of course, and me, you know, all of these T-shirts, they were free. They were given away. So, Justin and Chelsea, thanks for joining us. We are giving our first impressions since this was your first time. So, whichever one of you votes the other to go first.
They both voted the other goes first.
I know.
Look, I'm gonna go first. First off, sorry we're late. It happens. No one set an alarm clock, but it was a great nap. So, let's see, first impressions.
Well, first tell them that you're about your class.
Oh, yeah. You had a class.
Yeah. I just had to write a paper on this. So, for school, I'm actually taking a summer class, and part of the class was I had to attend the actual meeting. And in the class, there's certain stipulations I had to be in certain events and different preaching and different sessions that I had to go to, and then I had to break off and go to class a couple times while I was there. But it was interesting, all of it. I mean, there was a whole lot. I'm sure they've said, I don't know what they said because I wasn't here, but there was a whole lot of walking, a whole lot of talking, especially when walking with Michael and running into all the people he knew. It's like walking with me in Sulphur. I know everybody. But it was interesting to see all the different, like Michael would say, all the different people there together as one, just standing face to face talking to everybody like we were on the same level as they are. But this class, I had to actually write a 6 to 8 page paper on my thoughts of it, which is very hard to do because I just felt like I was repeating myself the whole time. But I did it. I turned it in yesterday. But all in all, it was interesting. We got a bunch of free T-shirts, which is always great. It is. Yeah. Other than that, I don't know. What do you think,
Chelsea?
Mel?
Did you write about the teachers in the paper?
I did write about the T-shirts in the paper. I did mention it.
For Justin to write 6 pages about something is a lot, because clearly he's a man of many words. But just getting there, when you walk in the door, I mean, I knew there were going to be a lot of people, and I don't know if it was Michael or somebody just kept saying like tens of thousands of people, and I'm like, yeah, okay, that's a lot of people. Okay, there really was that many people. You stand in line, kind of like at an amusement park, to check in, and it went rather quickly, but it was just standing in that moment, just kind of taking in all of the people. They just, for a brief second, I thought, we talk about there are other believers in the world, but to think for just a second that you were in the same room as, why am I crying about this? About being in the same room as that many brothers and sisters in Christ. It was just a really neat feeling for, we all have our differences and stuff, but it was just a neat feeling to be in the same room as that many fellow believers. But I'm good, stay. The worship part was probably one of my favorite things. Just being in there, even just not even singing, just listening, I just thought it's like a small glimpse of heaven. This is what we get to do. Now, as far as the business side of things, that was like a business meeting.
Steroids.
Yeah, thank you. I was thinking, wait, should I say that out loud? I don't know. But anyways, it was just a lot. There were things, before I even realized what was happening, things had already been passed or not passed, and they were on to this one, and just, we just kept like, what does this mean? Or what just happened? Or can you explain that to me in Chelsea terms? I don't know what that means. But at the same time, though, For the most part, I think the little bit that I understood, I think that there was some actual business that happened, things that needed to happen, but then came the people that, hold on, I'm trying to figure out how I want to say this. It was just hard part of it because, we were all there, we all should have the same mission, we all should have the same goal. But then there were just certain people who were there to cause division. And that was hard too. It's hard for me in general to understand, like, why can't we all just get along? And I mean, there is a whole world out there that is lost and they're dying, and they need us to share Jesus with them. But when we act like morons and fight with each other and dispute over things that aren't important, well, that hurts our witness for them, and that hurts, then we kind of prove them right, those who think that we're hypocrites or whatever, so that was just, it was hard for that part. But overall, it was fun. Our kids have already asked to go back in wherever they're, Indiana. It was a learning curve for them too. I mean, they've volunteered in different aspects of things, and they've been around lots of kids, but that was a lot of kids.
Yeah, the last number I heard was 1,000 kids, Jaden, for Giant Cow.
At SBC.
Okay, 800 kids.
I think they had 1,000 registered, but
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
800, 1,000, it's a lot of kids.
800,000.
What's 200 kids?
800 to 1,000.
It's more than the 40 to 50 that are around.
Yeah. What did you say? Oh, okay. So that was a neat learning experience for them to be able to just step out of their comfort zone, some more than others, and just love on other kids. Sometimes they would text and say, "Oh my gosh, children. Well, hello, welcome to parenting." Yeah. But it was just neat. After that first initial night, and a good rest sleep and pizza at 11 o'clock, they were ready to go the next day. So yeah.
And Jamie, what do you tell every volunteer for Giant Cow?
The first day. Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
We-
Oh, everybody cries.
Everybody cries the first night of Giant Cow.
And they did.
Our poor,
the first time doing it.
yeah, our poor girls walking back, because when they came out of Giant Cow, tell me when I'm talking too much. After they came out of Giant Cow, and they were plumb exhausted.
Well, and we didn't mention that the hotel was
A 15-minute
mile
Quarter
away.
mile away.
Yeah,
From-
Half
we had to
mile.
walk
Yeah.
And in New
all the way
Orleans, that's a
back. Yeah.
distance.
There was a miscommunication, and we thought they were going to be fed there, and they didn't have time. Anyways, they had not eaten, which is like mistake number one. Then they had to, hold on.
Are
They had
you
to
kidding me? We've got to
walk back to the hotel.
Terrible.
We almost, so Jamie, because he is fantastic in this way, he kind of hung back and he's like, "Guys, it's okay." Like he just kind of gave them a pep talk walking back, like, everybody cries. I cried, everybody cries on their first day of Giant Cow.
Probably sometimes continually, right? Yeah. You probably cry other days too, when you're.
Not Jaden.
Yeah, and whenever he's like, even Jaden cries, well, that, like, okay, well, if Jaden can do, that got their attention, so.
Yeah, so Giant Cow, just to remind y'all, is the children's, it's daycare, but it's much, much more than daycare. It's camp, it's VBS, it's childcare for the SBC annual meeting. Our kids, Jamie and Jaden, have been going. Jaden, I guess, since he was, what do we just think, 8, 7 years old. He has been in it every year. 2013 was his first time, so however old he was then.
7, yeah.
So that's what our kids went and volunteered with. All of our kids went and volunteered with. So when you hear us talk about Giant Cow or Cow, that's it.
And that's also what Jaden is doing this summer and did last summer too. He volunteers.
Right. Yeah, he got back
just to
from
make that
Austin
connection,
yesterday, and he'll go to camp, and then next week he's going to Indiana, and then he'll be home for good for the summer. He's been to Alaska and California and North Carolina and all over. Anyway, So that's Giant Cow.
They even tired Axel out. Like he was ready to go to bed at the end of the night. So
That's impressive.
That's saying a lot.
Etta, your impressions, it's not your first time.
No,
but
it's not my first. I was trying to think, is it our 10th?
Our first one was 2012. We didn't have it in
Minus
20 because of the
2.
pandemic, and we
And we
missed it
just-
in
so
16
it's our
because
ninth,
we're kind of
so ninth,
transitioning
maybe,
between here
yeah.
and Nixon.
Our 9th, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so not my first. Any significant impressions that were different? Not necessarily. It was very different going with people who had not been before because I felt an obligation. They didn't expect anything of me, just making that clear, but I kind of felt this obligation to like show them the ropes and, you know, introduce them to people and all that kind of stuff. So it was very different for me, that experience for me. Good, but just different. Yeah, I mean, I think I pretty much, even though I've been there a lot of times, I can echo what everybody else said. The worship is just phenomenal. It's different every year. A lot of times, whoever the SBC president is, their worship leader, not always, but a lot of times he is who is in charge of the music, and then they bring in different. So even the worship leader was James Cheeseman, who is Bart Barber's worship leader for FBC Farmerville. Yeah. So and so he's a small church worship leader. Now he's incredibly talented, but we had such a variety. We had Kenny and Claire who were here a few weeks ago. We had probably my favorite thing as far as worship is we did a song called they did a song. Well, I guess we all did it called "Behold Our God," which is actually our August song. Just so you know, but they did it. It's a fabulous song anyway, and but they did it with a stage full of and they sang each section in a different language. So it was
bits of the chorus.
Little bits of the no. I
repeated.
think it was the verses.
verse.
Yeah, it was
little
the
bits,
verses.
but repeated.
Yeah, verses. They would they started out in French and they did Spanish and then they did an Asian language. They did an African. I mean, they did
Japanese.
Yeah,
Chinese.
I mean, it was the coolest thing. And then when they got to the chorus and it says "Behold our God," and there was a point where they were singing. We were singing "Behold our God," and they were singing it in their language. It was the closest to actual heaven I have ever felt.
Well, actually, and I have my Bible ready because it made me think of the verse in Revelation when it's talking about who is worthy to open the scroll. I can't look at Miss Vita right now. Then I looked and I heard the voice of many angels around the throne, also the living creatures and the elders, and their numbers was countless thousands plus thousands of thousands. And they said with a loud voice, "Worthy is the Lamb who was slaughtered to receive power, riches, wisdom, strength, honor, glory, and blessing." And then I heard every creature in heaven, on earth, under the earth, on the sea, everything in them say, "Blessing and honor, glory and power to the one seated on the throne, to the Lamb forever and ever." And I just could not get that verse out of my head as that song. And it was just like, at 10,000 at least people
at least,
singing.
Yep.
I couldn't remember
Behold
the
our God,
lyrics.
yeah.
"Behold our God," and it was just, and they were singing. I mean, it was just
really,
a great.
that's what heaven's going to be like. You know, they're going to be singing to God.
It was very powerful.
It was just that. So that really was. I mean, the IMB sending ceremony is always a highlight. You know, we told you that about that last year, but they send all of the missionaries who are being commissioned this year.
Just at this time.
Or at this time, yeah. But they stand up and they say their they're 70 something.
72, 79, something like that. Missionaries.
Stand up and they say their names and they say what part of the world they're going to. They don't. Sometimes they say the country, but sometimes they just say the area because they can't.
Use fake names.
And they use fake names. Some of them are behind a screen, so you can't even see what their faces look like because this is all streamed now and everything. So that's really. Like Lacey said, and Chelsea said it too, I think, but just the fact that these are real people standing in front of you doing exactly what we've been talking, that we're sorry, they have literally, not literally, I guess, taken up their cross, but they have surrendered their entire life. They said, especially those ones that are going to the Middle East and to China and places like that they're saying, we could literally die for this. But it's worth it because our Jesus is worth it. And so that's just, it's phenomenal. Every year I say, one of the best things is reconnecting with people that we only see at SBC. And we may have known them before in a different ministry position, or we may have got to know them through SBC or whatever, but we get to see them. And it's just a reminder that we are not alone here. Not we as ministry staff and we as believers, we are not alone. There is a vast multitude out there who has the same goal. And sometimes we lose our way and we get distracted by all kinds of nonsense, and some of it honestly is even important. Not nonsense, but it's just, but the main thing is that, and that's what the sending celebration does, is it kind of brings you back to, here is why we're here. Yes, we have business to do, and we have to talk about money, and we have to talk about, you know, important matters, you know, and those things actually do affect the gospel, but ultimately, the reason we are here is to build his kingdom and nothing else. And so it's just really eye-opening to be there and be a part of that and just actually see it. Like Chelsea said, you're in a room of 10,000 people who, at least the very large majority of them are, you know, believers. And now, you know, you've got the press, and there's a lot of press there, and that's can be good and bad. There are some real allies in the press that you know, and then there are some who are not so much allies. And but so how we behave. The other thing that I think strikes me every year, real quickly, is that we, especially over social media, they always kind of remind people, you know, you are here as representatives of Jesus in this city, whatever the city is. This year it was New Orleans. And we never, you know, for the most part, I never see or read anything about people being rude to wait staff or hotel staff. For the most part, we as a group of Southern Baptists we leave with a better reputation, at least in that aspect of, we are people who tip well. We are people who are polite and kind. And I heard stories and read stories on Facebook and Twitter about people who, I mean, one guy got punched by a homeless guy because he was sharing the gospel with him. He was actually a drug addict, but, you know, I mean, so, I mean, they were attempting to do that. I mean, if we were really honest with ourselves, how many of us have the courage to walk up to a random drug addict in the middle of New Orleans and try to share the gospel with them? You know,
get punched.
You might get punched. And yeah. And apparently then another guy come on and said, oh yeah, I talked to that guy too, and he tried to get me, but or something like that. So it's happening. And there's another thing is that there's an event the week before called Crossover, and it's usually seminary students and college students, and they go to that city and they do all kinds of outreach events. And I don't know what the numbers are for how many, but they usually tell you how many gospel presentations happen through that week, and how many salvations they were, and how many people were connected with the church and all that stuff. And the numbers are just, they're incredible.
I know it was hundreds, 300 to 400 salvations. Thousands of times the gospel was shared, and tens of thousands of ministry contacts, because it's through churches and local ministries, and there are a lot of those in New Orleans. I mean, you've got, is it Q A Baptist Church, which is where you think that is. That's French Quarter Baptist Church. There's a mission in the French Quarter. You can imagine the sorts of ministry, Friendship House, that's what it's called, that's right. You can imagine the type of ministry that they see and do. So all that, so we get to hear about that. So we do that at every city we go to. Next year it'll be Indianapolis, Indiana, and there will be that sort of mission outreach beforehand. They've covered everything that I would give as far as first impressions. It is always the missionary commissioning, the sending celebration as we call it. For me, the screen in front of these people who are going to die. I mean, that is their mindset. They hope they don't, but that's what they're going to do. We are going to a country where we could die, and we're willing to do that. And anything that it's fine, anything up to that, but we'll do that. that is something. And this time, I didn't know it, but I knew somebody who was going to the mission field. He and his wife are in Louisiana, and they did tell us that. They even use, seems like maybe I don't think they even gave his church name. Yeah, they did, I remember now. But the names that they gave for them were not, maybe they were the middle names, but probably not. I only recognized him because of his voice. He has a very distinctive voice, and I thought, yeah, and sure enough. So it's just even closer to home when that happens. So those are the impressions. It is the worship again. Yeah, is always wonderful. There's always controversy, and it seems like it's getting worse instead of better. The controversial components this year, we knew they were coming. They started last year, and they hold over usually a year at least. So the big issues this summer were the disfellowshipping. We don't usually, it's technically not the word we use as Southern Baptists. Our phrase is no longer consider them in friendly cooperation. That's the phrase we use. But for all intents and purposes, you are disfellowshipping. You are saying you're no longer part of the fellowship. So there were 5 churches, I think, that were recommended. And as a matter of fact, to not get too much in the weeds of the polity of this SBC, the executive committee can make a few decisions for the convention. The other 363 days a year that the SBC technically does not exist. We're not really a denomination. We are a volunteer fellowship of autonomous churches. And we only exist 2 days out of the year when we come together as a convention. Then we separate, we're back to being autonomous churches, but we have the executive committee that does things. Primarily their main job is to write checks, send the money that we send to the cooperative program to the seminaries and the mission boards. They do have other responsibilities that we have given them. And one of those responsibilities is to a committee recommends it, remove churches that are no longer deemed in friendly cooperation. But when that happens, those churches can appeal the decision to the messengers. And that's what happened with 3 of the churches this time. One of the churches was removed because they employed a credibly accused, and I want to say maybe even convicted, but I'm not.
Yeah, he was convicted.
Okay. Abuser. No, he wasn't, because it's not.
Well, it was almost to the point. One of the.
Well, it wasn't a child. It was sexual harassment, not sexual abuse. So it wasn't something that could be convicted, but it was known. He had confessed it, that sort of thing, and they hired him anyway, or they called him his pastor. And that gets you kicked out of the convention if you're going to do that. They appealed. There's a church in Louisville, Kentucky that for the past 30 years has had a female pastor. The senior pastor, the lead pastor, was a female. After 30 years, we voted them out. It had never come up for a vote before, but it did this year. And then Saddleback Church, Rick Warren's church, and I talked about them. If y'all remember, I preached on women in the church back in 2021. I think it was 2 years ago. We were still in the gym. And I talked about Rick Warren's church because that was already bubbling, those issues. They appealed the decision. All 3 churches were voted out. Just to tell you how I voted to remove the Florida church with the pastor, the sexual harassment issue. I voted to keep Fern Creek, which was the church with the female pastor, and Saddleback. The Florida church, the sexual harassment church, that was a very easy decision on my part. Fern Creek, the church in Louisville, was not an easy decision. As a matter of fact, calling for the vote, ballot in hand, I still wasn't sure how I was going to vote. I believe, so our Baptist Faith and Message says, while both men and women are gifted for ministry in the church, the office of pastor is reserved for men. That's what our Baptist Faith and Message says. Our Constitution, which is really what you have to abide by to be a part of the convention, says that a church is in friendly cooperation if two big things. They closely identify with the Baptist Faith and Message and don't break any of the amendments, the constitutional parts that say you can or can't be a part of the church, part of the convention. And those things are, you can't have homosexuality, homosexual pastors, staff. You can't be a racist church, and you can't, there's a third one, and I always forget one of the three. Anyway, there's sin issues. So in deciding whether or not to keep Fern Creek, I disagree vehemently with having a female pastor. My argument for that, my scriptural proof, is not some of the other passages you might hear, but y'all have heard this before, but it's 1 Timothy, where Paul is telling Timothy that elders should have these qualifications and deacons should have these qualifications. And then it uses the word gune, which is either wives or women, depending on context, should have these qualifications. Well, I believe that when it says deacons should have these qualifications, and then it says gune, I think it's women. I think it's women deacons should have these qualifications. A lot of Baptist churches think that means wives. My issue with that is that why do deacons' wives have special qualifications and there's no qualification for the pastor's wives, the elders' wives? That seems odd to me, that she can do whatever she wants to, but I'm looking to see, but Aris, I was looking for a deacon's wife, she has very strict rules that she has to follow as a deacon's wife. Whatever, but Aris, you better be. I don't think that's the case. I think it's talking about female deacons. And since I think it's talking about female deacons, the fact that it doesn't talk about female elders means there weren't any, and that was the intention. And it was pretty obvious to everybody that there weren't female elders / pastors / overseers. So I think Fern Creek is very wrong having a female pastor. But our Constitution says closely identifies and friendly cooperation. Fern Creek, right down the line with the Baptist Faith and Message, agrees with everything except that one point. And they have never tried to change our Baptist Faith and Message. They haven't made a stink about it. They were a part of the convention when the 1963 Baptist Faith and Message was what everybody followed. Then in 2000 it was changed. They stuck around. They have statements about family and homosexuality and those things. They are not affirming of those issues. They have a woman pastor, though. In my opinion, they were in friendly cooperation, and they closely identified. They don't exactly identify, and they don't disagree with anything that is unorthodox, like they don't say there's not a Trinity. They don't say Jesus wasn't divine. They don't say he didn't bodily rise from the grave, it was a ghost or whatever. Orthodoxy, they agree with. They don't have sinful issues, homosexuals on staff, or they're not, as far as I know, they've never been accused of being racists in the church. They're being racists in their church and harboring that. So I'm like, I disagree with them, but I don't feel like we can tell them, all right, you cannot give, and they can still give, you just can't come and vote at our annual meetings anymore. We consider you too far outside the bounds of what we believe. So I voted to keep them. I was in the much minority I believe that was about 90% to 10% to remove them. And then Saddleback, I talked about them in that sermon, so I'll be briefer on them, but they have 12 elders over the church, and under that they have all of the rest of their staff, and all of their elders are men, and their staff underneath are both men and women, and they call them, a lot of them, if not all of them, pastors. Whether they're male or female, they call them pastors. And they ordain them as pastors. By the way, Baptist Faith and Message never mentions ordination. By the way, neither does the Bible. So, that's why we don't talk about it. We do it, but it's not a doctrine. So I voted to keep them too. I felt like they were within the bounds. Now, I will also say this, and this is live and going out on Facebook. If Rick Warren had hushed a long time ago, Saddleback might still be a part of the convention, but he talked a lot and he made it a lot more about himself than what his church did. And I think that it may not have made it through, but I think it would have been a lot closer. That was probably 80 to 20%, maybe 85, 15%. It still wasn't very close. But so anyway, that's how I voted on the big issues. There were a couple of other things. There was a resolution in support of women in ministry and all the different things women can do in ministry. That didn't get a lot of press because everything else that we talked about did, because we then also approved, we have to do it 2 years in a row, but this year we approved an amendment to our Constitution that, along with you can't be racist, you can't support homosexuality, and you can't support sexual abuse or employ people who have been accused of sexual abuse. That's the third one. Now there's a line that says, or there will be if it passes a second year, that says if you employ a female pastor of any kind, or actually they stated it more positively, they stated that you are considered in friendly cooperation only if men are employed as pastors of any kind. So any church, it might be in there somewhere, any church that has a staff member that they call pastor, that's a woman, which in fact is a good, easily thousands of our churches, it will be considered not in friendly cooperation next year if it passes. So it's actually probably in the Book of Reports because it's an amendment that has been around for a little while.
Oh, I thought he...
It was changed, but
okay.
You can get the gist of it. So anyway, I voted against that amendment. If the amendment had said something along the lines of, if your church has a plurality of elders or is a single pastor-led church like ours, and those elders or that pastor is female, you are no longer, I probably would have voted for that. But to tell a church that you can't call your associate staff, whatever they do, you can't call your female children's minister a children's pastor, I think it's bad terminology. I think you should be more careful than that. But I also think Chelsea shepherds the kids. She pastors the kids. That is a function. That is the job she does. She may not have the office of pastor, but I believe she has many of the functions and some of the role of pastor. I wouldn't call her that, again, because I think it's a little sloppy, but I don't care if another church does. I'm in the minority on that too. And that's okay. I'm at the moment, who knows what the years will hold, but I'll just say right now, I'm not planning on leaving the convention. I'm not that mad over it. I do know a lot of churches that are, because they have females called pastor. Now, they could very easily just change the title, and suddenly they're within the bounds of the Constitution. But I don't believe that's going to last. They're going to be, I call them heresy hunters, that are going to start looking, and they already are. I know of someone who got a phone call from a guy, he said his name was Tom, who said, I see you have, I don't know if they saw it on their website or what, but asked, do you have women serving as pastors in your church? I mean, there are folks out there looking for that to try to expel them. So could we get a phone call about that down the road? I think so, because we're not shy about the fact we have females on staff and have for 23 years, I think. 2000 was when Amy started. So, yeah. So those are the big issues. Everything else was fairly cut and dried. There's one other sort of smaller issue with abortion that has been talked about a lot, but it in no way looks like SBC is pro-choice or anything like that, though these folks would say it. If y'all have questions about that, I'll answer it, but it's not worth really getting into. Okay, so I think we've kind of given y'all some fodder for your questions, maybe. Do y'all have any questions? And I've got a microphone if you do, but I ain't getting down if you don't. Oh, I thought somebody was about to raise their hand. You just scratching your nose. That'll get you a cow bought in an auction. Y'all know that. Any questions?
You can ask them.
You can ask them. We got time. We're not. Well, we're just doing it for live, unless I'll repeat your question.
Just repeat.
Okay.
Agreed. Agreed.
To call them a pastor, you think is pride? And I don't disagree with you. Just for our online folks, the comment was churches that won't change their female titles from pastor to minister are being sinfully prideful and should just change the name, and that way it's not an issue, and then there's nothing to quibble about. And I don't disagree. I think and not to assume too many motives about Saddleback, but I think a lot of the announcement of what they were doing last year was intentional. It was to try to
It was
needle and maybe start change, and instead it went the other direction. I think if they maybe had just done it and not done a press release, it probably wouldn't have been as quite a big a deal. But on the other hand, if they would just call them ministers and whatever.
Yeah, I totally agree. But I will say this, as I've gotten older, I've begun to look at things and realize that lots of things are nuanced. And so, I think about a church maybe that has always called their children's pastor. Just for example, it's a tradition that has been, gone on for a long time, and say they've always had males for a long time, and suddenly they have a female that comes in and they want to serve in that role, and they've always called them that, and they don't even necessarily think about it, or they're not really worried about it. They just say that same thing that they've always called it. Well, I agree with you, it's sloppy and unnecessary, but that may be some of the nuance for some of those churches, that they hadn't.
It's never been an issue, but suddenly it is. It's never been an issue,
and suddenly it is. And the other thing is that, you're not supposed to use the slippery slope fallacy, but right now they're just going after the title. But we know there are already people that are saying, oh, you can't call them minister either. You can't call them even director. If you have a woman on staff, then you are.
There's some that go that far. There are others what are they doing? What are their functions? Do they have any pastoral functions? If they serve on staff at all, they're going to have pastoral functions.
Shepherding functions.
Shepherding, witnessing, praying, leading, that's all part of it. So it's going to take a while before this is resolved fully, I think. And it's going to, like most things, especially in the Southern Baptist world, it's pendulum swings. And right now we have swung way over here, and I think as that pendulum begins to hit the apex on that side, folks are going to realize, wait a minute, this is way too far, and we're going to have to do some correcting in a few years, and that's sadly kind of the way we do it. We react and then think about it. Shoot first, ask questions later, and that's going to be an issue for us down the road.
So we're just like Peter.
Just like Peter?
It just goes.
Well, yeah, we just, all right, we need to do this. Any other questions?
It's too vague.
Yeah. It's actually closely aligned, isn't it?
The phrase in the BF in the Constitution
Okay, well,
is closely identifies.
That was put in there a long time before
Yeah, long
any
before.
of this. Yeah.
It's very vague.
Yeah.
Society.
Right. Well,
Because there's a lot of.
yeah, there's so again for the online folks, the statement is that closely identifies sounds too much like how the world you identify as something, whether you are or not, I guess is kind of what you're saying. In sexuality, you're not a man, but you identify as one. Well, you're not. So our phrasing closely identifies could be construed as, if I'm putting words in your mouth, being kind of Southern Baptist, but you're not. And I don't disagree that that's how that phrase has come to be defined, but of course, way back when it was written, that wasn't the issue at all. It was intentionally, like Lacey said, it was intentionally vague because we wanted a big tent. We didn't say you had to agree with these things, boom, 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 in order to be a part. It was you closely identify, and that sounds better than kind of agree with these things, and that way you can be a part.
But one of the discussions, is the need to define what does closely identify mean. Does it, or
correct?
Is it? You have to. You
5
can
out of
miss
10.
one thing.
Yeah.
You can miss two things.
Right.
We don't. That's not because it's intentionally vague. And if we remember that we are cooperating for the spreading of the gospel, well, gosh, this verse has been coming up a lot, just about where where Paul says whether some people preach for this reason, some people preach for this reason, whatever the reason. They're preaching Christ crucified, and so that's what we have to think about too. Which issues are we going to say? Okay, well, they're no longer preaching Christ crucified. Fern Creek. I disagree with their thoughts on head pastor too, but if they've given to the cooperative program, they've been a part. They've given to IMB and NAM, and they're working to make sure that Christ is preached. And they check all these other boxes. It's just that one thing. Is that closely identifying, or is it not? And that's a struggle that we're having here.
Yeah, and one side of it.
Yeah, no,
right.
I understand. I understand what you're saying. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that is
exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a word battle. You're exactly right. And just some little more background is churches do not have to down the line agree with the Baptist faith and message. Our entities do. Whatever our current Baptist faith and message says, International Mission Board, North American Mission Board, Lifeway Resources, our 6 seminaries, the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission, and the Executive Board of the Southern Baptist Convention, they all have to down the line, point by point, agree. So our seminary, whatever our Baptist faith and message says, they have to teach that way, our seminaries. And I've looked for this quote, and I'm not even with the quote right because it's been so long since I saw it. I think Adrian Rogers said years ago when we were discussing, during the conservative resurgence, if you're on one side of it, the fundamentalist takeover, if you're on the other side of it, of the Southern Baptist Convention, his statement was, if the churches say that you have to baptize pickles, the seminaries better teach it. Of course, we're not going to say that, but that's the idea. We tell the entities what to do, but the entities don't tell us. That's the way we flow. The concern is we're beginning to invert that some. And of course, they say, well, no, we're not telling you the churches what they can do or not do. We're just telling you if you don't do it this way, you can't be a part of us. That's semantics too. I mean, that's playing word games also. So that's why I say this is gonna take some years to work through. A constitutional change takes a 2/3 vote 2 years in a row. So it may not pass next year, and we're back to where we were, or it may. We don't know how it was hand vote this time, so we don't know what the numbers really were on that. But okay, any other questions? All right. Well, if you have any more, ask us. You know, I love to talk about this stuff. It's really interesting to me. The rest of them may get tired of it after a while, but we're going to go ahead and head out to get our ice cream and brownies. They are in the fellowship hall. It is 5:15. Start at 5:30. If we can, let's shoot for 5:30. So y'all head on over there. Thank you for being online and watching us, and we will see you later.